The silence that descended on the dining room was heavier than the mahogany table itself. My grandfather had just raised his glass, smiling as he mentioned the $1,500 he sent me every month so I would never have to worry about rent. I felt the blood drain from my face, my fork hovering in midair, because until that exact moment, I had never received a single cent of that money. The snow in Winding Ridge always looked cleaner than it did anywhere else in Massachusetts. It was a heavy, cinematic white that coated the slate roofs and manicured hedges of my parents' neighborhood, turning the street into something out of a greeting card. As I parked my 10-year-old sedan at the bottom of the driveway, taking care not to block my father's pristine truck or my sister's luxury SUV, I felt that familiar tightening in my chest. It was the physical sensation of entering a room where you were already the disappointment. I turned off the ignition and sat in the silence for a moment. My phone screen lit up with a low balance alert from my bank app. I had $74 to last me until Tuesday. I swiped the notification away, took a deep breath of the freezing air that had already seeped into the car, and stepped out. Inside, the house smelled of sage, roasting meat, and expensive candles. My mother, Lorna, was in the foyer before I had even unzipped my coat. "You are late, Hazel," she said, offering her cheek for a quick, dry kiss. "I am sorry," I said. The traffic on the interstate was a nightmare. She made a small noise in her throat, a sound that meant excuses are for people who do not plan ahead, and gestured toward the living room. "Go say hello to your grandfather. He has been asking for you," and try to smile. "You look like you are heading to a funeral." I forced the corners of my mouth up. I was 32 years old, working 50 hours a week as a paralegal in a firm that treated me like furniture, and I was still terrified of my mother's judgment. The living room was warm, dominated by a fire that crackled behind a brass screen. My sister, Madeline, was holding court on the sofa. She looked effortless, wearing a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my monthly car insurance. She was laughing at something my father, Gordon, was saying. They looked like a magazine cover, the successful Ross family. And then there was my grandfather, Franklin Ross. He was sitting in his favorite wingback chair, a glass of scotch resting on the side table. At 84, he had slowed down, but his eyes were still sharp, lacking the milky haze that often comes with age. When he saw me, his face broke into a genuine grin. "There she is," he boomed, "the working girl." "Hi, Grandpa," I said, leaning down to hug him. He smelled of Old Spice and tobacco, a scent that made me feel 6 years old again. Gordon looked over, his smile tight. "Good to see you. Hayes, grab a drink. Dinner is in 10. I did not want a drink, but I poured a glass of wine because it gave me something to do with my hands. The dynamic in the room was already established. Madeline was the golden child, currently planning a wedding that seemed to grow more extravagant by the hour. Gordon was the benevolent patriarch, though he looked tired around the eyes. Lorna was the stage manager, and I was the audience member who had not bought a ticket. Madeline patted the spot next to her. "Come sit. I was just telling Dad about the venue. We are thinking of adding a raw bar." "That sounds expensive," I said without thinking. Madeline rolled her eyes playfully. "It is a wedding. Hazel, it is supposed to be special." Lorna called us to the dining room before I could dig a deeper hole. The table was set with the good china, the gold-rimmed plates we only used for Christmas and significant birthdays. This was just a Tuesday in December, a pre-holiday gathering because Franklin was visiting from his retirement community, Juniper Falls. We took our seats. Gordon carved the roast. Lorna distributed the sides, creamed spinach, potatoes, glazed carrots. For a while, the only sounds were the clinking of silverware and polite conversation about the weather and the neighbors. I kept my head down, focusing on my plate, trying to calculate how much gas money I needed to get back to my apartment in Cresthaven. "So, Hazel," Franklin said, his voice cutting through the ambient noise, "how is the apartment?" I looked up, swallowing a bite of potato. "It is fine. Grandpa, same as always. The heat is a little spotty, but it is home." Franklin nodded, looking pleased with himself. Good. I'm glad to hear it." You know, I was telling your father just the other day how happy I am that we could set that up for you. I frowned slightly. Set what up? The arrangement, Franklin said. He lifted his glass, gesturing toward me with a benevolence that made my stomach turn over. I know it is not a palace, but knowing I am sending that $1,500 a month so you never have to worry about rent, it helps me sleep at night. Sweetie, it really does. The room went dead silent. I froze. My fork clattered against the china, the sound impossibly loud. I looked at Franklin, waiting for the punchline. $1,500. That was exactly my rent. I let out a nervous, confused laugh. What are you talking about? Grandpa? Franklin blinked, his smile faltering slightly. The rent money, the check I send, or the transfer. I suppose it is now. I looked at my father. Gordon was staring at his plate, his jaw working as if he were chewing something tough. I looked at my mother. Her eyes were wide, fixed on me with a warning intensity. I do not understand. I said, my voice shaking, you do not send me money for rent. Franklin's brows knit together. Of course I do. I have been doing it for 3 years. Ever since you moved into that place in Cresthaven. I felt a flush of heat crawl up my neck. No, I said. Grandpa, I pay my rent. I pay it every month. Gordon cleared his throat loudly. Dad, I think you are a little confused. I am not confused, Franklin snapped, his voice sharp. I know what I sign. $1,500 a month. For Hazel's housing. I looked around the table. The air felt thin. Grandpa, I said slowly, trying to make sense of it. I promise you, I have never received a dime from you for my apartment. I pay it myself. I use an app on my phone. Gordon stood up halfway, reaching for the wine bottle to refill a glass that was not empty. Hazel, drop it, he said, his voice tight. Dad just means the help we have all given you over the years. He is conflating things. I am not conflating a damn thing, Franklin said, slamming his hand down on the table. The silverware jumped. I sent the checks to the management company. Then I set up the wire. I have seen the statements. I looked at my grandfather. Really looked at him. He did not look confused. He looked insulted. He looked like a man who had been generous and was now being told his generosity was a hallucination. Gordon, Franklin said, turning to my father, you told me she was struggling. You told me she needed the help. We all help each other. Gordon said quickly, that is what families do. But she says she never got it. Franklin pointed a shaking finger at me. Hazel, are you telling me you have been paying rent this whole time? Yes, I said, my voice rising. Every single month. It is half my paycheck. Lorna slammed her napkin onto the table. Hazel, stop making a scene. I am not making a scene, I shouted. He just said he has been paying my rent for 3 years. That is over $50,000. Where is it? Gordon's face was red. Lower your voice. You are upsetting your mother. I am upsetting myself. I looked back at Franklin. Grandpa, who do you send the money to? Franklin looked at me, his blue eyes watery and hurt. He looked like I had slapped him. I thought you knew, he whispered. I thought you were just too proud to say thank you. My heart broke. He thought I was an ingrate. He thought I had been taking his money for 3 years and pretending I had done it all on my own. I never knew. I said, my voice trembling, I swear to you, I never knew. Lorna stood up. Dessert, she announced, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. We are having pie. Gordon, help me clear. We are not having pie, Franklin said. He pushed his chair back. I need to use the restroom. He stood up, looking frazzled and old, and shuffled out of the room. Gordon followed Lorna into the kitchen. The swinging door closed, but not before I heard Lorna hiss, why can she never just keep her mouth shut? I sat there, my hands shaking in my lap. Madeline picked up her wineglass and took a long sip. Well, she said, staring at the centerpiece. That was awkward. You knew? I asked her. She shrugged, not looking at me. I knew Grandpa helped out. I did not know the details. Honestly. Hazel, why did you have to embarrass him like that? He is old. He probably just imagines he sends it. He did not imagine $50,000. Madeline, she sighed, checking her manicure. Just let it go. You know how Dad gets when you start digging. I did not let it go. After the dishes were cleared and the pie was served, cherry, which I hated, I found Franklin in the den. He was sitting in the dark, staring at the embers of the fire. "Grandpa?" I asked softly. He did not look up. I thought I was helping. "Hazel, your father said you were drowning. He said the paralegal job did not pay enough." "It doesn't," I admitted, sitting on the ottoman near his feet. "But I manage. I always manage." He looked at me then, and I saw a flash of the steely businessman he used to be. "I sent the money." "Hazel, I know I did. I believe you." I said, "But I need to know where you sent it." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small leather notepad and a gold pen. He wrote something down with a shaky hand, tore the page out, and handed it to me. "Marrowgate Leasing Services." I read aloud. "That is who gets the check," he said. "First it was checks, then your dad helped me set up the direct deposit so it would be faster. Same place every time." I stared at the name, Marrowgate. It sounded official, generic. It sounded like 1,000 other property management firms, but it was not the name of the company I paid. I paid a woman named Sharon via a generic landlord portal. And before that, I mailed checks to a P.O. box in Cresthaven listed on my lease. "Thank you," I said. Franklin sighed, closing his eyes. "I just wanted you to be safe. Hazel, a young woman living alone. I wanted you to have a roof no one could take away." I squeezed his hand. "I know, Grandpa." When I walked back into the hallway, Lorna was waiting for me. She had her arms crossed, her lips pressed into a thin line. "You are leaving," she stated. I nodded. "I think that is best." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You have upset your father terribly. He works so hard to keep this family afloat, to manage everyone's problems. And you come in here and throw accusations around. I did not accuse anyone. Mom, Grandpa said he sent money. I said I did not get it. That is a fact, not an accusation." Lorna shook her head, looking at me with a mix of pity and disdain. "You always have to be the victim, don't you? Even when people are trying to help you. How is it help if I never saw the money?" She waved a hand dismissively. "Maybe it went to your student loans. Maybe it went to that car that is always breaking down. Gordon handles the finances. He moves things where they need to go. You should be grateful he takes the time. Grateful that my rent money went missing?" "Stop it," she hissed. "Just stop it. Go home. Hazel, and do not call your grandfather tomorrow. Let him rest. You have confused him enough for one night." I grabbed my coat and walked out the door without saying goodbye to Gordon or Madeline. The drive back to Cresthaven took 45 minutes. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My mind was racing, replaying the conversation. $1,500 every month for 3 years. My apartment building, the Crest, was a 4-story brick block that had seen better days. The hallway smelled of bleach and old cooking oil. I unlocked my door, number 4B, and stepped into the chill. I kept the thermostat at 62 degrees to save money. I dropped my bag on the floor and went straight to my laptop. I sat at my small kitchen table, still wearing my coat, and opened it. First, I searched Marrowgate Leasing Services. Nothing. I tried variations. Marrowgate. Marrowgate Properties. I found a business registration from 4 years ago, listed in a neighboring county. Status: dissolved, refiled under a slightly different name. Marrowgate Management, LLC. The registered agent was a lawyer I had never heard of. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I logged into my email. I went to the spam folder. Something I rarely checked. There were 3 emails from Property Management. The subject line of the most recent one, dated 2 days ago, made my stomach drop. Urgent. Notice to quit. Eviction warning. I clicked it, my hand shaking on the trackpad. "Dear tenant," it read, "we have not received full payment for the months of October and November. In addition, outstanding maintenance fees and late penalties have accrued. Total amount due, $4,200. Failure to remit payment within 5 days will result in legal action. I stared at the screen. I had paid October. I had paid November. I had the transaction receipts on my phone. I pulled out my phone and opened the payment app I used. There they were. Minus 1,500 sent on October 1st. Minus 1,500 sent on November 1st. Sent to Rent Pay 4B. I grabbed the shoebox from my closet, where I kept my important papers. I dug through it until I found my lease. I had signed it 3 years ago. I remembered sitting in a coffee shop with the property manager, a woman who said she was a freelancer for the building owner. I smoothed the document out on the table. Landlord, Cedar Marrow Holdings, LLC. Tenant, Hazel Ross. I looked at the signature page. My signature was there, Hazel Ross. But as I looked closer, under the harsh light of the kitchen bulb, something looked wrong. The loop of the H was too wide. The Z was too sharp. It looked like my signature. Yes, but it looked like my signature from my driver's license. Not the way I signed when I was holding a pen. It looked traced. And then I saw the date next to the landlord's signature. The date was written in a distinctive, blocky hand. The sevens had a slash through them. My father wrote his sevens with a slash. I sat back, the room spinning slightly. My grandfather thought he was paying my rent. I was paying my rent. My mother told me to shut up about it. My father wrote his sevens with a slash. And now, I was apparently being evicted for not paying rent I had already paid. I picked up my phone and dialed the number listed in the eviction email for the property manager. It rang once, twice, then a mechanical click. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. Please check the number and try again. I lowered the phone. The silence in the apartment was absolute. I was alone. I was broke. And someone had been stealing $1,500 a month in my name for 3 years. My phone buzzed in my hand, making me jump. It was a text message from my mother. Do not drag your grandfather into your drama. He is fragile. We will discuss this next week when you have calmed down. I looked at the text. Then I looked at the eviction notice on my screen. I was not going to calm down. I stood up and went to the fridge. I took out a bottle of water and drank it in one long pull. My practical side, the part of me that organized case files for 8 hours a day, began to take over. The shock was receding, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. I needed bank statements. I needed the canceled checks Franklin mentioned. I needed to know who Marrowgate really was. I walked over to the window and looked out at the parking lot. Snow was starting to fall again, covering the grime of the city. Next week, my mother had said. I looked at the date on the eviction email. I did not have until next week. I sat back down at the computer. I created a new folder on my desktop and named it simply Evidence. I scanned the lease. I took screenshots of my payment history. I downloaded the eviction email. Then I opened a blank document and typed a header. Timeline of payments. I started with the day I moved in. August 1st, 3 years ago, I typed, Grandfather claims payment started. I typed, I began paying rent via personal check. Then app. I typed, difference, $54,000. $54,000. That was a down payment on a house. That was my student loans paid off twice over. That was the freedom I thought I didn't have. I thought about Madeline's wedding venue. I thought about my father's new truck. I thought about the way Lorna looked at me, like I was a burden she had to carry. We all help each other, Gordon had said. I stared at the blinking cursor. No, I was helping them, and I didn't even know it. I closed the laptop. I needed to sleep, but I knew I wouldn't. I lay down on my couch, pulling a blanket over me, listening to the wind rattle the window pane. I felt small. I felt stupid. But mostly, for the first time in my life, I felt dangerous. They thought I was the naive one, the quiet one, the one who would just laugh it off and apologize for making a scene. They were about to find out exactly how much attention I paid to the details. I closed my eyes, but the image of my father's slashed sevens burned behind my eyelids. The investigation had begun. The next morning, The sky was a bruised purple. I woke up with a stiff neck and a headache that sat right behind my eyes. I made coffee, the cheap instant kind I bought in bulk, and sat with the lease again. I needed to see Franklin, not at the house. Not with Lorna hovering and Gordon pouring wine to distract everyone. I needed to see him alone. He was at Juniper Falls. It was a 40-minute drive from my apartment, in the opposite direction of my parents' house. I called my office. Hazel Ross, I said when the receptionist answered. I have a family emergency. I will not be in today. I did not wait for approval. I hung up. I showered, dressed in my most professional clothes, a charcoal blazer and slacks, and grabbed the folder where I had put the lease and my printed bank statements. As I walked out to my car, I checked my mailbox. There was a letter there. No return address. Just my name. Handwritten. I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It was a printout of a ledger. Unit 4B. Tenant. Ross. Balance. Forward. 0. Note. Internal adjustment. There was no date. No company header. I looked around the parking lot. It was empty, save for a few snow-covered sedans. Someone knew I was looking. Someone had dropped this off. Internal adjustment. I crumpled the paper and shoved it into my pocket. I got into my car and turned the key. The engine sputtered, then caught. I backed out of the spot, my eyes scanning the windows of my building. I wondered if the property manager was watching. I wondered if my father was watching. I drove out of the complex, turning onto the main road. The tires crunched on the salt and sand. I was going to Juniper Falls. I was going to get those canceled checks. And if my family wanted to call me unstable, fine, I would be unstable. But I would be unstable with the receipts. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Lorna. Gordon is worried about you. Please call him. I threw the phone onto the passenger seat. I drove toward the highway, the heater blasting against the cold, heading toward the only person in my family who had ever tried to give me anything for free, and I was going to find out who had taken it from him. Juniper Falls was less a retirement community and more a resort for people who had finished the hard work of living. The lobby smelled of lemon polish and fresh lilies, a sensory-aggressive cleanliness that tried to mask the underlying scent of antiseptic. I signed in at the front desk, my hand trembling slightly as I wrote my name. The receptionist, a woman with a smile so fixed it looked painful, handed me a visitor badge. He's in the solarium, she said. He likes the morning light. I found Franklin Ross sitting at a small glass table, an untouched cup of tea steaming beside his elbow. He was wearing a cardigan I had bought him for Christmas 2 years ago, and on the table in front of him sat a thick, navy blue accordion folder. He did not look like a man losing his grip on reality. He looked like a man preparing for a board meeting. Hazel, he said when he saw me. He did not smile. His face was grave, lined with a sleeplessness that mirrored my own. Sit down. I sat. The wicker chair creaked beneath me. I did not want to open the conversation, because once I did, I could never go back to not knowing. I found the statements. He said. He pushed the folder toward me. I opened it. Inside was a forensic accounting of his love for me. It started with photocopies of physical checks, dating back 3 years. They were written in his jagged, forceful cursive. Pay to the order of Marrowgate Leasing Services. The amount? $1,500. The memo line? Hazel rent. Then, about 18 months ago, the checks stopped and were replaced by printouts of wire transfers. Automatic debit. Marrowgate. I flipped through them, the paper dry against my fingertips, every month, like clockwork, while I was eating ramen to save money for car repairs, while I was turning down dinner invites because I was short on cash. This money had been leaving his account. Look at the endorsement on the back of the checks, Franklin said softly. I turned one of the older check copies over. There was a stamp, for deposit only, account ending in 4429. I pulled up my own banking app on my phone. I went to my payment history. I had been sending my rent to a profile labeled Rent Pay 4B. When I clicked on the details, it showed the routing destination. My payments were going to an account ending in 8110. They were going to different places. Grandpa, I said, my voice barely a whisper. "This account number. It is not the one I pay." He nodded. His eyes locked on mine. "I know. I called the bank this morning before you got here. They told me the account ending in 4429 belongs to a business entity, but the routing number was updated 6 months ago to sweep funds into a secondary holding account." He reached into the folder and pulled out a separate sheet of paper. It was a printout from his bank's online portal. He pointed to a line item from last year, November 12th. "Transfer, $1,500. Memo, Hazel Housing." Then he pointed to the line below it. November 13th. Auto transfer to ROS Supply A. Operating. I stared at the letters. ROS. Ross. Outdoor Supply. The air left my lungs in a rush. Ross Outdoor Supply was my father's business. It was a high-end hunting and camping store in town that had been struggling with the e-commerce shift for a decade. Gordon Ross complained constantly about overhead, about Amazon, about the death of Main Street. "Grandpa," I said, feeling sick, "this says Ross Outdoor Supply." Franklin's hand shook as he picked up his tea. "It does. Does Dad handle your accounts?" I asked. "He helps me," Franklin said. "He has power of attorney for emergencies, but he is not supposed to touch the operating account unless I'm incapacitated." He looked at me, his eyes wet. "Hazel, did Gordon tell you I stopped sending the money?" "No," I said. "He never told me you started." Franklin closed his eyes. A single tear leaked out and tracked through the wrinkles of his cheek. "I thought I was taking care of you." "You were," I said fiercely, reaching across the table to grab his hand. "You were trying. That counts. I need to call him," Franklin said, his voice hardening. "I need to get Gordon down here and ask him why my money for my granddaughter is sitting in his business ledger." "No," I said. Franklin's eyes snapped open. "Why not? He is stealing from you. He is stealing from me, because if you call him right now, he will say you are confused." I said, I remembered the way Gordon and Lorna had looked at each other at the dinner table, the way they had framed his clarity as senility. "He will say you transferred it there yourself and forgot. He will say he is managing it for you. He will say I am upsetting you and that I am the one lying." Franklin slumped back in his chair. "He knows I would never believe that." "Does he?" I asked. "Grandpa, last night they tried to convince a room full of people that you were hallucinating. If we confront him without undeniable proof that he cannot talk his way out of, he will just rewrite the story. He will make you the old man who lost his mind, and me the ungrateful daughter causing trouble." Franklin looked at the folder. Then he looked at me. He looked terrified, not of the money, but of his son. "What do we do?" he asked. I stood up, clutching the folder to my chest. "I'm going to find out exactly how he did it, and then we are going to make sure he cannot deny it." I drove straight to my bank. I sat in the cubicle of a personal banker named Timothy, a young man who looked about 12 years old. I handed him my ID and asked for a full trace on my last 12 rent payments. "I need to know where the money actually lands," I said, "not just the intermediary, the final destination." Timothy typed for a moment, frowning. "Okay," he said. "So, you are paying through a third-party processor. That masks the recipient slightly, but we can see the merchant ID." He turned the screen toward me. "The merchant ID changed in August of the year you moved in." He said, "See here? The first payment went to Cedar Marrow Holdings, then, starting in September, it switched to Marrowgate Management, then, 6 months ago. The routing number updated again. Updated to what?" "To a private checking account," he said. "It looks like the business account was closed, and the payments were forwarded to a personal account at a different bank." "Whose personal account?" "I cannot see the name," Timothy said apologetically. "Only the routing number, but it is a personal account, not a business one." I thanked him and left. I sat in my car in the bank parking lot and pulled out my laptop. I tethered it to my phone's hotspot. I needed to understand the shell game. I searched Marrowgate Leasing Services again. This time, I went deeper. I went to the Secretary of the Commonwealth's corporate database. Marrowgate Leasing Services, dissolved 4 years ago. Marrowgate Management LLC, formed 3 years ago. Status, active. Cedar Marrow Holdings LLC, formed 3 years ago. Status, active. I looked at the filings. They were all essentially empty boxes. No employees listed, no website, just a mailing address that routed to a UPS store in a strip mall 3 towns over. But then I saw the name of the registered agent for Cedar Marrow Holdings LLC, Dane Kessler. I froze. I knew that name. Dane Kessler was my father's oldest friend. They went duck hunting together every November. Dane was a real estate attorney who had handled the sale of my parents' first house. I had a vague memory of him at a barbecue when I was 10, handing me a burnt hot dog and calling me kiddo. My landlord wasn't a stranger. My landlord was my father's hunting buddy. I felt a surge of adrenaline that was half rage, half panic. They had set this up. They had built a stage set of an apartment rental, put me in the middle of it, and charged me admission. I needed to see my parents. I drove to Winding Ridge. The house looked peaceful in the afternoon light. The wreath on the door was perfectly centered. I let myself in with my key. Lorna was in the kitchen, arranging flowers in a crystal vase. She jumped when the door slammed behind me. "Hazel," she said, her hand flying to her chest. "You scared me to death. I thought you were at work. I took the day off." I said, "Is Dad here?" "He is in the study," she said, her eyes narrowing. "Why? What is going on? You look manic." I walked past her. She followed me, her heels clicking rapidly on the hardwood. Gordon was sitting at his desk, surrounded by invoices. He looked up, annoyed, as I walked in. "Hazel," he said, "I am working. What is this?" I stood in front of his desk. I did not sit down. "Who is Dane Kessler?" I asked. Gordon's face did not change, but his hands went still on the papers he was holding. "He is a friend of the family. You know that. Why? Because he is listed as the registered agent for the company that owns my apartment building." I said. Gordon blinked. "Is he?" "Well, Dane owns a lot of property. He is a successful guy." I leaned forward. "And the rent payments I make to his company? They get rerouted to a personal account. And Grandpa's payments? The ones you said he imagined? They go to a business account." Gordon sighed. Taking off his reading glasses, he rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Hazel, we talked about this. Your grandfather is confused. He is not confused." I said, "I saw the statements. Dad, I saw the transfer to Ross Outdoor Supply." The room went silent. I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. Lorna stepped up beside me. "Hazel, you are upsetting your father." "No," Gordon said, holding up a hand. "Let her speak. She thinks she has found a smoking gun." He looked at me, his expression shifting from annoyance to a kind of pitying disappointment. That was the look that always worked on me, the look that made me feel small and stupid. "Honey," he said, "Ross Outdoor Supply handles logistics for a lot of local properties. We supply maintenance gear. We handle snow removal equipment. Sometimes funds move through the business for invoicing. It is complicated." "It is not complicated," I said, my voice shaking. "It is stealing." Gordon stood up. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered. He loomed over the desk. "You always think you are smarter than everyone else, don't you?" he said quietly. "You take one paralegal class, and you think you are an attorney. You think you can audit a business you know nothing about. I know that Grandpa sent $50,000 for my rent, and I never saw it." I said, "And I told you," Gordon said, his voice rising, "that money went to support the family, to support you. Who do you think paid for your car insurance when you were 22? Who do you think helped you with your security deposit?" "I paid my security deposit," I shouted. "You paid part of it," Gordon shouted back. "You have no idea what it costs to keep people afloat. Hazel, you live in your little bubble, paying your little bills, thinking you are independent. You are not independent. You are sustained. By me. By this family." He was turning it around. He was making me the burden. Lorna grabbed my arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Your father is under a lot of pressure," she hissed. "The business is in a delicate place. If you go running around telling people your grandfather is funding the store, the creditors will panic. Do you want to ruin us? Is that it? I pulled my arm away. I want to know why I'm paying rent to a ghost company. You are paying rent to live in an apartment, Gordon yelled. What does it matter whose name is on the LLC? You have a roof over your head. It matters because you lied, I screamed. You let Grandpa think I was a charity case. Get out, Gordon said. He sat back down and picked up his pen. Get out of my house, and if you go back to Juniper Falls and upset your grandfather again, I will have the staff ban you from the premises. I have the medical power of attorney. Hazel, do not test me. I looked at him. I looked at my mother, who was staring at me with cold, hard eyes. I walked out. I felt like I was vibrating. I had the truth, but they had the narrative. They had the power. I needed help, real help, not family help. I drove to the public library and sat in a carrel. I searched for tenant advocacy groups in the area. I found a nonprofit called the Fair Roof Alliance. They had a walk-in clinic on Thursday afternoons. It was Thursday. The Fair Roof office was in the basement of a community center in the next town over. The waiting room was full of people looking tired and scared. I waited for an hour before a woman named Sarah called my name. We sat in a small cubicle. I told her everything. I told her about the double payments, the shell company, the lease signature that looked traced. Sarah listened without interrupting. She took notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she put her pen down. This is more common than you think, she said. Really? I asked. We call it coerced debt or familial financial exploitation. She said, it happens often with elderly parents and adult children. The identity theft component, using your name to sign a lease you didn't authorize, or manipulating the terms, that is fraud. But I signed the lease. I said, I think I did. But looking at it now, if they used your identity to create a tenancy that generates debt or funnels money, that is a crime. Sarah said, but the tricky part is proving intent. They will argue it was an informal family arrangement. They will argue you benefited from the housing. She leaned forward. Have you checked your credit report recently? No. I said, not in detail. My score is okay. Check it, she said. Right now. Sometimes these schemes involve more than just rent. If they were comfortable using your name on a lease, they might have been comfortable using it elsewhere. I pulled out my phone. I opened a credit monitoring app I had downloaded years ago and never used. I scrolled through the open accounts. Credit card. Chase. Mine. Student loan. Navient. Mine. Auto loan. Toyota. Mine. Personal loan. SoFi. Opened 2 years ago. Original balance. $10,000. I stopped. I did not have a SoFi loan. I clicked on it. The monthly payment was $215. I thought about my rent payments. My base rent was $1,500. But every month, the property manager added utility surcharges and common area fees. The total usually came to about $1,715. I had been paying the loan. They took out a loan in my name and then billed me for the monthly payments as part of my rent. I felt like I was going to throw up. I showed the screen to Sarah. That is actionable, she said quietly. That is clear-cut identity theft. But Hazel, you have to be ready. If you pursue this, you are looking at criminal charges against whoever opened that loan. I stared at the screen. $10,000. Where did that money go? I think I know. I said, I left the Fair Roof office as the sun was setting. The world looked gray and hostile. I sat in my car and called Franklin. I had to warn him. I had to tell him not to engage. Grandpa, I said when he answered, Hazel, you sound terrible. I found something else. I said, a loan, in my name. I think Dad opened it. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Oh, Gordon, Franklin breathed. It was the sound of a heart breaking. I am going to fix this, he said. I am going to call the police myself. No, I shouted. Grandpa, listen to me. You cannot call anyone yet. Why not? This is a crime, Hazel. Because if you call the police on your son, without the paperwork fully prepared, Gordon will use the medical power of attorney. He threatened me with it today. He said he would ban me from seeing you. He will say you are having an episode. He will say you are paranoid." Franklin was silent. "We need to be smarter than them," I said. "We need the paper trail to be so thick they cannot breathe under it." "What do you need me to do?" he asked. His voice was steady now. Cold. "I need you to act normal." I said, "I need you to pretend you believe them. Tell Gordon you are sorry for the confusion at dinner. Tell him you looked at your records and realized you were mistaken." "Hazel, I cannot lie to him. You have to." I said, "You have to buy me time. I need to find out where that $10,000 went, and I need to prove that the lease is fake." There was a pause. Then Franklin spoke. "The file," he said. "What file?" "When I set up the trust, Gordon made me sign some updates. About 2 years ago, around the time that loan was opened, he brought a notary to the house, a woman. She had a seal. Do you remember her name?" "No." Franklin said, "But I remember she called him Gordy. She knew him." I closed my eyes. It was a conspiracy of small-town favors. A notary who knew his nickname. A landlord who was his hunting buddy. "I will find her." I said, "Grandpa, please, just play along. For a few days, I will try." He said, "But Hazel, be careful. Your father is a desperate man. I have seen the store's numbers. He is underwater. People who are drowning will climb on top of anyone to breathe, even their daughters." I said, "Especially their daughters," he replied. I hung up. I went back to my apartment. It felt tainted now. I looked at the walls, wondering if they were even insulated, or if that was a lie too. I looked at the lease sitting on my table. I needed one more thing. I needed to link the loan to the store. I logged into the bank portal for the property manager app I used. I downloaded the full transaction history as a CSV file. I lined it up with the dates from Franklin's folder. Franklin deposits $1,100. Next day, withdrawal of $100 to Ross Outdoor Supply. I looked at the loan date, 2 years ago. On the 15th of March, the loan amount was $10,000. I searched the local news archives for Winding Ridge, Ross Outdoor Supply. I found an article from 2 years ago. March 20th. Ross Outdoor Supply announces grand reopening after renovations. The photo showed Gordon and Lorna standing in front of the store, cutting a ribbon. They were smiling. The windows were new. The signage was fresh. My credit score had paid for their windows. My grandfather's trust had paid for their inventory. And I had been paying them back for the privilege, month by month, dollar by dollar. I printed the article. I taped it to the wall next to the lease. My phone pinged. It was a text from Madeline. "Mom says you're spiraling. Do you need me to come over? We can watch movies and just chill. Please don't do anything crazy." I looked at the text. Spiraling. That was the word they used to dismiss valid anger. I typed back, "I'm fine. Just tired. Sorry about the dinner." I hit send. Let them think I was folding. Let them think I was the Hazel they knew, the one who smoothed things over, the one who took the path of least resistance. I turned back to my wall of evidence. I was not spiraling. I was ascending, and I was going to take them all down. The paper was taped to the glass door of the lobby, its corners fluttering in the draft from the heater vent. It was bright pink, a color chosen not for cheerfulness, but for alarm. It demanded to be looked at. I stood there with my bag of groceries digging into my shoulder, staring at the bold black letters at the top. Notice of foreclosure action. My eyes scanned down the page, skipping over the legal jargon until they hit the relevant names. Defendant, Cedar Marrow Holdings, LLC. Property address, 4400 Cresthaven Boulevard. The building owner, my father's hunting buddy, Dane Kessler, or whatever shell company he was hiding behind, had stopped paying the mortgage. The bank was taking the building back. I felt a cold sensation ripple through my stomach. It was not the dramatic, heart-stopping panic of the movies. It was a slow, sickening realization that the floor I was standing on literally did not belong to the people I was paying to stand on it. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number listed at the bottom of the notice for the plaintiff's attorney. It was late, almost 6 in the evening, and I expected a voicemail. Instead, a woman answered on the second ring. Law Office of Priya Halden. Hello, I said, my voice sounding thin in the empty lobby. My name is Hazel Ross. I am a tenant at 4400 Cresthaven Boulevard. I'm standing in front of a foreclosure notice. There was a pause, the sound of typing, and then the woman's voice returned. Sharper this time. Ms. Ross, yes, I have you listed here. You have me listed? I asked. As a tenant? I have you listed in the discovery documents provided by the bank. She said, but not just as a standard tenant. Your name appears on the loan covenant as a related party. The grocery bag slipped from my shoulder and hit the floor. A jar of salsa shattered, but I barely heard it. What does that mean? I asked. Related party? It means, Ms. Halden said, her tone professional but wary, that when Cedar Marrow Holdings refinanced the property 2 years ago, they listed you as a guarantor or a beneficial occupant to secure favorable terms. Usually, this implies a familial or business relationship with the borrower. I leaned against the cold brick wall. My knees felt like water. I am not a partner. I said, I rent apartment 4B. That is all. Ms. Halden hummed, a non-committal sound. That may be your understanding, Ms. Ross, but the paperwork suggests otherwise. If you are truly just a tenant, you need to be aware that your lease may be voided by the foreclosure. However, if you are a related party, you could be named in the deficiency judgment if the building sells for less than the mortgage balance. Deficiency judgment. The words hung in the air like smoke. I did not sign anything to be a guarantor. I whispered, Then you have a very serious problem, she said, because someone signed it for you. I hung up. I left the broken salsa on the floor, a red smear on the cheap tile, and walked up the 3 flights of stairs because I did not trust the elevator. I unlocked my door and bolted it behind me. I walked into the center of my living room and stood there, breathing hard. They had not just stolen my money. They had used me as a human shield. My father and his friends had used my clean credit, my name, my identity, to prop up a failing real estate investment. And now that it was collapsing, I was the one who was going to be buried in the rubble. I went to my evidence wall. I looked at the timeline I had started. 2 years ago. That was when the personal loan appeared on my credit report. That was when Cedar Marrow Holdings refinanced the building. That was when Franklin's trust was updated. It was all one coordinated movement. A massive financial leverage pulled by my father to keep his head above water, using every asset he could reach. And I was an asset. My phone buzzed. It was Madeline. I am downstairs. Buzz me in? Mom said you sounded weird. I stared at the screen. I did not want to see her. I wanted to crawl into a hole, but I needed to know what they knew. I needed to see if the mask would slip. I buzzed her in. Madeline appeared in my doorway 3 minutes later, looking like she had just stepped out of a catalog. She was wearing a beige trench coat and holding a bottle of wine. Her face was arranged in an expression of carefully calibrated concern. Hazel, she said, stepping over the threshold and wrinkling her nose slightly at the smell of my apartment. Oh my God. You look exhausted. I feel exhausted. I said. She set the wine on the counter and moved to hug me. I went stiff in her arms. But she didn't seem to notice, or she chose to ignore it. She pulled back and looked at me with those wide, blue eyes that had gotten her out of every parking ticket she had ever received. Mom is really worried. Hayes, she said, she thinks you are having a breakdown. She says you are making up stories about Grandpa. I am not making up stories, I said, walking over to the kitchen table and sitting down. The foreclosure notice is taped to the front door. Maddie, did you see it? Madeline paused, unwinding her scarf. I saw some paper. I did not read it. You know I am terrible with legal stuff. It says the building is being repossessed. I said, the company Dad's friend runs stopped paying the mortgage. Madeline sighed, a long, exasperated sound. She opened the wine with a practice that suggested she had done this many times this week. Dad is handling it, she said. I heard him on the phone with Dane. It is just a mix-up with the bank, a paperwork error. You know how banks are. It is not a mix-up, I said, and Priya Halden, the attorney, Told me I'm listed as a guarantor. Madeline poured 2 glasses of wine. She brought one to me and sat down, crossing her legs. Hazel, listen to me, she said, her voice dropping to a soothing, conspiratorial register. You are overreacting. Dad does business with a lot of people. Sometimes names get moved around on paper to make things work. It does not mean anything bad is going to happen to you. It means I could be sued for millions of dollars. Madeline, she laughed. A light, tinkling sound that made my skin crawl. Don't be dramatic. You don't have millions of dollars. Nobody is going to sue you. Dad is just creative. He is keeping everything going. For us? For us? I asked. Or for Ross Outdoor Supply? For the family, she said firmly. She took a sip of wine. Look, I know you are stressed. The job, the bills, being single. It is a lot, but you cannot go attacking Dad. He is barely sleeping as it is. Why is he barely sleeping? I asked. Because business is tough, Madeline said. The supply chain issues, the online competition. He is fighting tooth and nail to keep the store open, to keep the house, to pay for the wedding. Ah, the wedding. Is that why he needed Grandpa's money? I asked quietly. Madeline's eyes flickered. She looked away, toward the window. I don't know what you are talking about. I think you do. I said, I think you know exactly where that $1,500 a month went. Madeline set her glass down a little too hard. The wine sloshed over the rim. Stop it. Hazel, you are sounding paranoid. I came here to cheer you up, not to be interrogated. She stood up. I need to use the bathroom. And then we are going to order Thai food and watch a movie. And we are not going to talk about money, okay? She didn't wait for an answer. She walked into the bathroom and closed the door. I sat there, looking at her purse on the counter. Next to it was her laptop. She had brought it because she never went anywhere without it. She was constantly updating her wedding mood board. The screen was dark, but the lid was open. I stood up. I walked over to the counter. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I touched the trackpad. The screen flared to life. She hadn't put it to sleep. It was open to a spreadsheet. Google Sheets. The tab name was Wedding Budget. Final. I scanned the rows. Venue, Lakeshore Pavilion, florist, petal stem, catering, the Gilded Fork. The numbers were astronomical. $40,000 for the venue, $12,000 for flowers. But it was the income tab at the bottom that caught my eye. I clicked it. Rows of deposits. Dad, check, Mom, savings, and then a recurring monthly line item. H.R. Housing support. I felt the blood drain from my face. H.R. Hazel Ross. The amount next to it was variable. Sometimes it was $1,000, sometimes $1,200, sometimes the full $1,500. There was a note column next to it. Transfer from ROS operating, transfer from ROS operating, sweep from Marrowgate, and then a formula at the bottom that summed these amounts into a cell labeled Mad's Dream Fund. I stared at it. The text blurred. My rent. My grandfather's help. The money I worked 50 hours a week to pay. And the money Franklin thought was saving me. It wasn't just keeping the store afloat. It was buying Madeline's centerpieces. It was paying for her raw bar. The bathroom door clicked open. I didn't move. I didn't close the laptop. I stood there, my hand resting on the counter, staring at the screen. Madeline walked out, drying her hands on a paper towel. So, I was thinking pad thai. But if you want... She stopped. She saw me. She saw where I was looking. The silence that stretched between us was thick and suffocating. It was the silence of 20 years of family dynamics collapsing in a single second. Hazel, she said, her voice high and tight. That is private. I turned the laptop slowly so she could see the screen. H.R. Housing support. I read aloud. My voice sounded calm, which terrified me more than screaming would have. Is that me? Madeline froze. She didn't deny it. She couldn't. The evidence was glowing in 12-point Arial font. She licked her lips. It is just a label. Hazel, it is how Dad categorizes the cash flow. It is my rent money. I said, it is the money Grandpa sent for me. And it is in your wedding fund. Madeline's face crumpled, not into sorrow, but into a defensive, ugly panic. It is not all for the wedding, she said, stepping forward. It is mixed funds. Dad said the business accounts are liquid. He moves money where it is needed. It was needed for your flowers? I asked, while I was getting eviction notices. You were never going to be evicted, Madeline shouted, her composure cracking. Dad owns the building. Well, Dane does, but Dad controls it. He would never have let them throw you out. The notices were just automated. They were part of the system. Part of the system. I repeated, the system where I pay rent, and Grandpa pays rent, and you get a $40,000 party. Madeline threw her hands up. Oh, grow up, Hazel. You are always so dramatic about money. You have a job. You are fine. Dad said he was going to put it back. He said it was a temporary loan from the operating account because the store had a bad quarter. A temporary loan for 3 years? I asked. She glared at me, tears pricking her eyes. I didn't ask for it. I just wanted a nice wedding. Dad said he had it covered. He said, don't worry about the cost. Princess, I have a revenue stream. I am the revenue stream. I said, I am the stream. Madeline. She wiped her eyes angrily. Well, what do you want me to do? Cancel the wedding? Give you the money back? I don't have it. It is already paid to the vendors. I want you to admit it. I said, I want you to admit that you knew. She looked at me, her chin trembling. I didn't know the details. I just knew. I knew Dad was using your apartment to help balance the books. And you didn't tell me. I said, why would I tell you? She cried. You would just get righteous and rigid and ruin everything. You always do. You would have stopped paying, and then the store would have gone under, and Dad would have had a heart attack. I was protecting the family. I looked at my sister. I saw the fear in her eyes, but underneath it, I saw the entitlement, the deep, unshakable belief that her happiness was the family's primary objective, and my stability was an expendable resource. Get out, I said. Hazel, please, get out, I screamed. The sound tore comfortably from my throat. Get your wine, get your laptop, and get out of my apartment before I throw them both down the stairs. Madeline grabbed her things, her hands shaking. You are making a mistake, she hissed as she backed toward the door. You are going to end up alone, Hazel, totally alone. She slammed the door behind her. I stood in the silence, my chest heaving. I looked at the glass of wine she had poured for me. I picked it up and poured it into the sink. I was not alone. I had the truth. I went back to my computer. My hands were shaking, but my mind was icy. Madeline had said Dad controls the building. I went to the website for Cedar Marrow Holdings. There wasn't one, but I found the domain registration record I had missed before. Registrant contact. Admin. Email. admin@cedarmarrow.com. I opened my email client. I composed a new message. To admin@cedarmarrow.com. Subject. Inquiry regarding foreclosure. Body. Testing. I sent it. Then I waited. Most email servers, when configured poorly, will generate a bounce back or a delivery receipt that reveals the final destination server. 10 minutes later, I didn't get a bounce back, but I got a read receipt confirmation I had requested. Your message to admin@cedarmarrow.com was read by Gordon. Ross@rossoutdoorsupply.com. I stared at the screen. There it was, the digital fingerprint, the email for the landlord forwarded directly to my father's inbox. He was the landlord. He was the property manager. He was the thief. He had been reading my emails about the leak in the bathroom. He had been reading my requests for maintenance, and he had been sending me automated eviction threats while eating Sunday dinner at the same table. I printed the screenshot. I added it to the folder. My phone buzzed again. Voicemail received. From Grandpa. I picked up the phone. I hesitated. I was afraid of what I would hear. I was afraid Gordon had gotten to him. I pressed play. Franklin's voice filled the small room. It sounded old and tired. stripped of the vigor he had shown at the retirement home. "Hazel, it is Grandpa. I did what you said I shouldn't do. I called your father. I closed my eyes. No. Grandpa. No. I had to know. Hazel. I asked him about the transfers. I asked him about the store account." A pause. A heavy, wet breath. He told me you are sick. Honey. He told me you have been having episodes again, that you are imagining things. He said the money is in a trust for you, and that you just don't remember him telling you. He was so convincing. Hazel, he sounded so worried about you. Another pause. He told me I shouldn't trust you with finances right now, that you are unstable. I don't know what to believe anymore. My head is spinning. Please just call him and make peace. I can't take this fighting. I am too old for this. The message ended. I lowered the phone. Gordon had played his trump card. He had used my emotions, my outburst at dinner, to paint me as mentally incompetent. He was gaslighting his own father to cover his tracks. I looked at the foreclosure notice on the table. I looked at the screenshot of the wedding fund. I looked at the read receipt from Gordon's email. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. Hot and angry. Make peace. Franklin had said there would be no peace. Gordon Ross had taken my money. He had taken my credit. He had taken my trust. And now, he was trying to take my sanity. I walked over to the window, down on the street. The street lights were flickering on, illuminating the slush and the grime. I was done being the daughter. I was done being the sister. I was the plaintiff now. I picked up the phone and dialed Priya Halden's office again. I knew she wouldn't answer, but I needed to leave a message. "Ms. Halden," I said when the beep sounded, "this is Hazel Ross. I have evidence that the related party signature was forged, and I can prove that the landlord and the beneficiary of the rent payments are the same person. I want to meet, and I want to know how to file a fraud report with the Attorney General." I hung up. I turned off the lights in the apartment, sitting in the dark, watching the red light of the smoke detector blink. One blink, liar. Two blinks, thief. I waited for the morning. Priya Halden's office was not designed to comfort people. It was a glass box overlooking a gray slice of the financial district, filled with the smell of scorched coffee and printer toner. Priya herself was sharp angles and terrifying competence. She sat across from me, her fingers drumming a rhythmic tattoo on the stack of papers I had brought her. "So, let me understand the timeline," she said, not looking up. "You signed a lease 3 years ago. You have been paying rent. Your grandfather has been paying rent, and now the building is in foreclosure, and the bank thinks you are a guarantor on the mortgage. That sums it up." I said. My voice sounded steady, which was a miracle considering my hands were shaking in my lap. Priya looked up. Her eyes were dark and unreadable. "Ms. Ross, do you understand what a beneficial occupant is?" I shook my head. "Not exactly. It is a term often used in commercial real estate or complex residential holdings," she explained. "It means that while you may not be the deed holder, you are listed as receiving a material benefit from the property's financing, often to skirt occupancy requirements for the loan. If your name was used to secure better terms, say, to prove that the building had a stable, family-backed tenant with a high credit score, then the bank views you as part of the investment group, not a victim, a participant." I felt the blood drain from my face. "A participant. If this building goes under," she continued, leaning forward, "and the sale of the asset does not cover the debt, the bank will come for the guarantors. If your signature is on that covenant, they will come for you. They can garnish your wages. They can seize your assets. They can destroy your financial future before it even begins. But I didn't sign it. I said, my father, or someone he works with. They must have forged it." Priya sat back. "Then you need to go on the offensive. Immediately. If you wait until the bank serves you, it will look like a defensive fabrication. You need to file a formal report with the Massbridge Financial Protection Bureau. You need to create a time-stamped record that says, 'I am a victim of identity theft,' before the bank decides you are a co-conspirator." I looked out the window. It was starting to rain, streaks of water distorting the city below. "If I file that report," I said quietly, "it triggers a criminal investigation." "Yes, Priya said. It does. It will destroy my father's business. Priya picked up a pen and clicked it. Once, twice, Ms. Ross, your father's business is likely already destroyed. That is why they stopped paying the mortgage. The only question now is whether you want to be buried in the wreckage with him. I walked out of her office 20 minutes later. The rain had turned into a cold, biting drizzle. I stood on the sidewalk, watching the rush hour traffic crawl by. I thought about Gordon. I thought about him teaching me to ride a bike, his big hands steady on the handlebars. I thought about the way he always carved the turkey, making a show of giving me the best piece. Then I thought about the loan in my name. I thought about the apartment I was paying for twice. I pulled up the address for the Mass Bridge Financial Protection Bureau on my phone. It was 6 blocks away. I started walking. The bureau was a depressing place. All fluorescent lights and linoleum floors that had been buffed into a soulless shine. I took a number and waited 40 minutes between a man complaining about a used car dealer and a woman clutching a stack of medical bills. When my number was called, I walked to the window. The clerk, a man with tired eyes and a name tag that read Davis, slid a form toward me. Type of fraud? He asked, his fingers hovering over a keyboard. Identity theft, I said, and familiar financial exploitation. He stopped typing and looked at me. Family member? Yes. He nodded slowly, a look of recognition passing over his face. That is the hardest kind. Fills out about 30% of our intake. You have documentation? I place my folder on the counter. I have the lease with the questionable signature. I have the credit report showing the unauthorized loan. I have the foreclosure notice listing me as a related party. Davis whistled low through his teeth. You came prepared. I have to be. I said, they are very good at telling stories. I filled out the affidavit. I wrote down the dates. I wrote down the names. Gordon Ross, Cedar Marrow Holdings, LLC. I wrote down the amounts. When I signed the bottom of the page, my hand didn't shake. It felt heavy, like I was signing a death warrant, but it was steady. Davis stamped it. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. Received. Here is your case number, he said, handing me a slip of pink paper. An investigator will be assigned within 10 business days, but this protects you. If the bank comes calling, you show them this. It stops the clock on your liability. Thank you, I said. I walked back out into the rain. I felt lighter and colder. I needed to see Franklin. I needed to know the mechanism of the betrayal, not just the result. When I arrived at Juniper Falls, it was dinner time. The dining hall was full of chatter and the clinking of silverware. I found Franklin at a small table near the back, eating alone. He looked frail today, his skin like parchment paper. Hazel, he said, his face lighting up when he saw me. I didn't expect you. I sat down across from him. I'm sorry to interrupt your dinner. Grandpa. He waved a hand. It is just meatloaf. It is always meatloaf on Thursdays. He pushed his plate away and looked at me closely. You look like you have been in a fight. I feel like it, I admitted. I reached into my bag and pulled out the file Priya had given me. Not the legal threats, but the questions about the trust. Grandpa, I said gently, I need to ask you about the family trust, the one you set up for the grandkids. Franklin's eyes darted away. He picked up his napkin and dabbed at his mouth unnecessarily. What about it? Priya, my lawyer. She thinks that for Gordon to have moved money this freely, he must have had access that goes beyond a standard power of attorney. She asked if the trust terms were ever altered. Franklin looked down at his hands. They were trembling. I trust Gordon, he whispered. He is my son. I know. I said, I know you do, but did you sign anything recently? Maybe 2 years ago? He was silent for a long time. Then he sighed, a sound that seemed to deflate his entire frame. It was a Sunday, he said softly. They came to visit, Gordon and Madeline. It was right before the store did that big renovation. Gordon was agitated. He said the laws were changing. He said if we didn't update the trust structure, the government would take 40% of it in taxes. And he brought a notary? I asked. Yes, Franklin said. A woman. She seemed nice. They put the papers in front of me. There were so many pages. Hazel, the print was so small. Did you read them? He looked up at me, his eyes full of shame. I tried, but my eyes aren't what they used to be. And Gordon kept saying, "Just sign here. Dad, we are losing daylight. Do you want the government to take the girl's inheritance?" I reached across the table and covered his hand with mine. "It is not your fault, Grandpa. He trusted me," Franklin said, his voice breaking. "He knew I would sign it because I wanted to protect you. He used my love for you to do what? To rob us." I said. Franklin pulled his hand away and covered his face. "I am so stupid. I am an old fool. You are not a fool." I said firmly, "You are a father who trusted his son. That is not a sin. The sin is his." I stood up. I had what I needed. Coercion. Undue influence. It was another layer of the fraud. "I am going to fix it, Grandpa. I promise." As I walked toward the exit, I saw a familiar car pulling up to the main entrance. It was my mother's Lexus. I froze. I couldn't deal with Lorna right now. But she had already seen me. She parked crookedly and got out, not even bothering to close her door properly. She marched across the wet pavement, her coat flapping in the wind. "Hazel," she called out. I stopped. "What are you doing here?" "Mom? I came to see my father," she said, breathless. "But I'm glad I caught you. We need to talk." She grabbed my arm and pulled me toward a bench under the awning. "Out of the rain. Your father is a wreck," she said. "He hasn't eaten in 2 days. He is pacing the floor. Maybe he should stop stealing from his children." I said, "That might help his appetite." Lorna's face hardened. She opened her purse and pulled out an envelope. It was thick. "Stop it," she hissed. "Just stop it. Look, we scraped this together. It is $5,000, cash." She tried to shove the envelope into my hand. I stepped back, letting it fall to the ground. It landed in a puddle. "What is this?" I asked. "It is for you," she said, staring at the envelope in the mud. "To help with bills, to help with whatever. Just take it. And please, Hazel, for the love of God, stop digging. You are going to kill your grandfather with this stress." I laughed. It was a harsh, jagged sound. "You are bribing me? With $5,000? It is not a bribe. It is a gift. It is hush money. Mom, and it is not even good hush money. You stole $50,000 from Grandpa and who knows how much from me, and you offer me $5,000 to shut up?" Lorna's eyes filled with tears. Real tears? I couldn't tell anymore. "We didn't steal it," she cried. "It was a loan. We were going to put it back. The store. The store is everything. Hazel, if Ross Outdoor Supply goes under, we lose the house. We lose the health insurance. We lose everything. Your father was just trying to keep the lights on. By taking out a loan in my name?" I asked. "By forging my signature? He didn't mean to hurt you," she pleaded. "He just needed a credit profile that wasn't maxed out. He thought he could pay it off before you ever noticed. But he didn't." I said, "He paid the minimums, and he charged me for them." Lorna wiped her face. "Hazel, please, if you go to the authorities, if you drag this into court, Dane Kessler will testify that you knew." I stared at her. "What?" "Dane," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "He and Gordon, they have an understanding. Dane will say you were a silent partner, that you signed those papers willingly." "You are threatening me now?" I asked. "First a bribe, now a threat?" "I am trying to save you," she insisted. "You cannot win against them. Hazel, they have lawyers. They have money. They have my money." I corrected. I looked down at the envelope in the puddle. The water was soaking into the corner, turning the paper gray. "Keep it," I said. "You are going to need it for Gordon's bail." I walked away. I heard her calling my name, but I didn't look back. I got into my car and drove. My hands were shaking so hard, I had to grip the wheel until my fingers ached. I went home. I didn't turn on the lights. I sat by the window and watched the street. I had the affidavit. I had Franklin's testimony about the trust. I had Lorna's confession, even if it was unofficial, that the loan was opened by Gordon. But I needed the final link, the money trail. I opened my laptop. I had access to Franklin's bank account now. He had given me his login credentials at the retirement home. Writing them on a napkin with a trembling hand, I logged in. I navigated to the transfers. November 12th. $1,500 to Ross Outdoor Supply. I opened a second tab. I went to the Secretary of State's website and searched for Ross Outdoor Supply. I pulled their UCC filings. There were liens against the business, but there was also a list of associated accounts used for credit referencing. One of them was a checking account at First City Bank. I went back to my own bank portal, the one where I could see the property manager payments, Rent Pay 4B. I clicked on the transaction details for the last month. I exported the metadata. It was a mess of code, but buried in the string was the receiving bank's routing number. It matched the Ross Outdoor Supply account at First City Bank. Okay, I thought, so the rent goes to the store. But where does it go from there? I remembered the spreadsheet on Madeline's laptop, Mad's Dream Fund. I went to the website for Lakeshore Pavilion, the wedding venue. They had a client portal link at the bottom. I clicked it. Username, Madeline Ross. Password, I tried Mad's Wedding. Incorrect. I tried Ross Wedding 2024. Incorrect. I tried Future Mrs. Incorrect. I tried Sparkle. It opened. My sister used the name of her golden retriever for everything. I navigated to the billing tab. Total contract, $45,000. Amount paid, $32,000. I clicked on Payment History. October 1st. Payment, $1,500. Method, ACH. Transfer from Ross Outdoor Supply. November 1st. Payment, $1,500. Method, HH. Transfer from Ross Outdoor Supply. There it was. My rent check. Transferred to the store. Transferred to the venue. But then I saw something else. I scrolled back to the beginning of the payments. 2 years ago. Initial deposit, $5,000. And then, a series of smaller payments. $200, $300, and then, suddenly, about 18 months ago, the payments jumped to exactly $1,500 a month. I looked at the dates. That was the month my rent went up. I dug through my old emails. I found the notice from the property manager. Due to rising property taxes and market adjustments, your rent will be increased from $1,200 to $1,500. Effective immediately. My rent had been $1,200. Franklin had been sending $1,500. Gordon had been skimming the difference, $300 a month, for years. But 18 months ago, he needed more cash for the wedding deposits. So he raised my rent to match Franklin's payment, ensuring that the full amount Franklin was sending could be justified as housing costs if anyone ever asked. While simultaneously extracting the maximum amount from me, they didn't just steal the money, they engineered my cost of living to match their theft. I printed the page. The printer whirred in the darkness. I had it all. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I drove to Ross Outdoor Supply. The store was located in a strip mall that had seen better days. The sign was huge, a leaping buck, but the paint was peeling. I parked right in front. I walked in. The store smelled of rubber boots and gun oil. There were no customers, just rows of camouflage jackets and expensive coolers. Gordon was behind the counter, counting cash in the register. He looked up when the bell on the door chimed. "We are not open yet," he said automatically. Then he saw it was me. His face went blank. He closed the register drawer with a definitive click. "Hazel," he said, "I thought I told you not to come here." I walked up to the counter. I placed the folder on the glass, right on top of a display of hunting knives. "I know, Dad," I said. He looked at the folder. He didn't touch it. "You know what? I know about the sweep account. I know about the transfer to Lakeshore Pavilion. I know you raised my rent to match the amount Grandpa was sending so you could funnel the exact figure into Madeline's wedding." Gordon stared at me. He didn't blink. He didn't panic. He just looked tired. He sighed, picking up a rag and wiping the counter. "You have been busy. I filed a report with the Mass Bridge Financial Protection Bureau yesterday. I said, "Case number 44921. Gordon stopped wiping. His hand froze mid-circle. "You did what?" "I reported the identity theft. And the fraud." He looked up at me then, and his eyes were cold. Absolute zero. "You reported your own father to the state?" "I reported a thief." I said. Gordon laughed. It was a dry, humorless bark. "A thief. Is that what you think I am?" I pointed to the folder. "The evidence says yes. I am a survivor." "Hazel!" he shouted, slamming the rag down. "I have kept this family fed for 30 years. When the market crashed, who paid the mortgage? Me. When the supply chain broke, who figured it out? Me. You stole $50,000 from your father," I yelled back. "I borrowed it," he roared, "to save the store, to save the legacy." "And the wedding?" I asked. "Was the $40,000 party for the legacy too?" Gordon narrowed his eyes. "Madeline deserves happiness. She is not like you. Hazel, she is softer. She needs looking after." I felt a sharp pain in my chest, like a rib cracking. "And I don't?" I asked. "I am just the workhorse? The one you can bleed dry because I am strong enough to take it?" He looked at me with a mix of pity and disgust. "You are the one who cares about paper. Hazel, you care about receipts and ledgers. You choose paper over people. That is your problem. You have no loyalty." "Loyalty?" I whispered. "You took out a loan in my name. You made me a guarantor on a failing building without my knowledge. You set me up to be sued by a bank. Is that loyalty?" "I was going to fix it," he insisted. "Once the holiday season sales hit, I was going to pay it all back." "I had a plan. You always have a plan, Dad, and the plan is always to use someone else's money." The back door of the store opened. Madeline walked in, shaking a wet umbrella. "Dad, the caterer needs the final head count by noon or they are going to—" She stopped. She saw me. She saw the tension in the room, thick enough to choke on. "What is going on?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Your sister," Gordon said, gesturing at me, "has decided to turn us in. She went to the authorities. Maddie, she is trying to send me to jail." Madeline dropped her umbrella. She looked at me, her eyes wide with horror. "Hazel, you didn't—" "I did. I said, 'How could you?'" she cried. "The wedding is in 3 weeks. The wedding is paid for with stolen money," I shouted. Madeline flinched. She looked at Gordon. "Dad, tell her it is not true. Tell her Grandpa gave us that money." Gordon looked away. He couldn't say it. Not in front of me. Madeline turned to me. "Grandpa wanted me to have it. Hazel, he told me." He said, "I want you to have the wedding you deserve." He said that because Dad told him the money was for rent. I said, "Dad told Grandpa I was destitute. So Grandpa sent checks. And then Dad took those checks and gave them to you. Grandpa didn't buy your flowers. Maddie, he paid for my phantom eviction." Madeline put her hands over her ears. "I don't believe you. You are just jealous. You have always been jealous." I looked at them. My father, the martyr, my sister, the princess. They had built an entire reality where I was the villain for asking where my money went. "I am done." I said, "I am done paying for this family." I turned to leave. "You walk out that door," Gordon said, his voice low and dangerous. "And you are dead to us. Do you hear me? No Christmas. No birthdays. You are cut off." I stopped. I looked back at him. "Dad," I said, "I have been the one cutting the checks for 3 years. You are not cutting me off. I am cutting you off." I walked out. The bell chimed cheerfully behind me. I drove back to my apartment. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still the color of a bruise. When I got to my building, there was a man standing in the lobby. He was wearing a cheap suit and holding a manila envelope. "Hazel Ross?" he asked. "Yes." He thrust the envelope at me. "You have been served." He turned and walked away before I could even speak. I looked at the envelope. Cedar Marrow Holdings LLC v. Tenants et al. I opened it right there in the lobby. It was a summons, but it wasn't just an eviction. It was a cross-complaint filed by the bank's attorneys. Defendant, Hazel Ross. Status, beneficial occupant, guarantor. Allegation, fraudulent conveyance and breach of contract. I scanned the document. It alleged that I had conspired with Cedar Marrow Holdings to falsify occupancy rates and creditworthiness to secure the original loan. It claimed I was liable for the deficiency balance. Estimated liability, $1.2 million. I leaned against the mailboxes. Gordon had known. When he threatened me at the store, he knew this was coming. He had set me up as the fall guy. If the store went down, if the building went down, he had ensured that my name was on the paperwork that would burn. He had used me as a shield. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the dirty tile floor. $1.2 million. I closed my eyes. They thought this would break me. They thought I would run back to them, begging for Gordon to fix it, begging for Dane Kessler to make it go away. They thought I would trade my silence for safety. I opened my eyes. I stood up. I walked to the elevator. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to war. The conference room at Juniper Falls was designed to diffuse conflict. The walls were painted a soothing sage green. The chairs were upholstered in a soft, non-confrontational beige, and the lighting was kept intentionally low. It was a room meant for discussing dietary restrictions and medication schedules, not felony fraud. I arrived 20 minutes early. I set up my side of the table with the precision of a surgeon laying out instruments. To my left, the affidavit from the Massbridge Financial Protection Bureau. In the center, the bank tracing records linking my grandfather's checks to Ross Outdoor Supply. To my right, the spreadsheet from Madeline's laptop showing the wedding fund. Priya Halden sat next to me. She was silent, her presence radiating a calm, lethal professionalism. Across from us sat Mr. Henderson, the mediator provided by the Juniper Falls Resident Advocacy Group. He was a retired judge with kind eyes and a hearing aid that whistled faintly. "We are just here to facilitate communication," Mr. Henderson said gently. "The goal is clarity and resolution for Mr. Ross." "Clarity," I said. "That is all I want." The door opened at exactly 10 o'clock. Franklin walked in first, leaning heavily on his cane. He looked thinner than he had 2 days ago, his skin papery and pale. He avoided my eyes as he took the seat at the head of the table. Then came Gordon and Lorna. They were dressed for church. Gordon wore a navy blazer with gold buttons, his hair combed back perfectly. Lorna was in a cream-colored suit that screamed innocent grandmother. Madeline trailed behind them, looking like a tragic heroine in a black dress, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue. They sat opposite me. Gordon placed a leather portfolio on the table. He nodded at Mr. Henderson, ignored Priya, and looked briefly at me with an expression of profound disappointment. "Shall we begin?" Mr. Henderson asked. Gordon cleared his throat. "Before we get into whatever Hazel has concocted, I think it is important to establish the context of my father's health." He opened his portfolio and slid a single sheet of paper toward the mediator. "This is a letter from Dr. Aris, Dad's neurologist," Gordon said, his voice smooth and deeply regretful. "It notes that Dad has been experiencing increased confusion, conflation of past and present events, and some mild paranoia regarding his finances. We have been managing this privately to protect his dignity, but given the circumstances—" I looked at Franklin. He was staring at the letter, his jaw tight. He didn't look confused. He looked like a man watching his son bury him alive. "Mr. Ross?" "Mr. Henderson asked Franklin, "Do you have any comment on this?" Franklin looked up. His blue eyes were clear. "My memory is fine," he said, his voice raspy but steady. "I know what day it is. I know who is in this room, and I know I sent $54,000 to pay for an apartment that my granddaughter was already paying for." Gordon sighed. A sound of practiced patience. "Dad, we have been over this. You sent money to the family pot. We used it to support everyone. You just latched onto the rent idea because it was easier for you to track. It wasn't an idea," I said. I spoke for the first time, keeping my voice low. It was the memo line on every check. I slid the copies of the checks across the table. 36 checks. I said, each one labeled Hazel Rent, or Hazel Housing, and 18 months of wire transfers with the same descriptor. Lorna scoffed. A memo line is not a contract. Hazel, no, I said, but a routing number is a destination. I moved the second document into the center. This is the tracing record. I continued. The money left Grandpa's account. It went to a shell company called Marrowgate, and then, every single month, it was swept, in full, into the operating account for Ross Outdoor Supply. Gordon didn't flinch. I told you, he said, the business manages family cash flow. That is how we have always done it. And from there, I said, sliding the third document forward, it went here. I pointed to the Lakeshore Pavilion payments. $45,000 for a wedding venue. I said, paid directly from the account that received Grandpa's rent money. Madeline let out a small, strangled sob. You are ruining my wedding, she cried. You are making it sound dirty. It is dirty. Madeline, I said, it is stolen money. Gordon slammed his hand on the table. It is not stolen. It is family money. Dad gave it to us. I didn't give it to you for a party. Franklin's voice cut through the room. Sudden and sharp. I gave it to keep Hazel off the street. Because you told me she was drowning. Franklin turned to Gordon. You sat in my living room. Gordon, you drank my scotch. And you told me Hazel was eating instant noodles and missing rent payments. You told me she was going to be evicted if I didn't help. Gordon's face reddened. She was struggling. Look at her car. Look at her clothes. I was paying my bills. I said, I was fine. I was building my own life. You were barely scraping by, Gordon shouted. I did what I had to do to equalize the family assets. Madeline needed help. You needed humility. Humility? I asked. Is that what you call identity theft? Priya Halden leaned forward. I think this is the appropriate time to introduce Exhibit D. She pulled a document from her briefcase. It was a single sheet of paper, protected by a plastic sleeve. This, Priya said, is the authorization form that switched Mr. Franklin Ross's payments from paper checks to the automatic wire transfer 2 years ago. She slid it toward Gordon. Please look at the signature block, she said. Gordon looked. He went pale. It is signed Hazel Ross, Priya said, but the handwriting in the body of the form, the dates, the account numbers, matches the samples we have of your handwriting. Mr. Ross, and the IP address used to submit the digital copy traces back to the Wi-Fi network at Ross Outdoor Supply. The room went dead silent. You forged my client's signature to authorize the diversion of funds from her grandfather. Priya stated, that is wire fraud. That is a federal crime. Lorna gasped. She looked at Gordon. You said she signed it, she whispered. You told me she agreed to the switch. Gordon looked trapped. He loosened his tie. It was a verbal agreement, he stammered. Hazel said to handle it. I just did the paperwork for her. I never said that. I said, I never knew the money existed. And there is more. Priya said, she pulled out the foreclosure summons. This was served to my client yesterday. It names her as a beneficial occupant and a guarantor on the mortgage for the Cresthaven property. Priya looked at Dane Kessler's name on the paperwork. We spoke to the bank this morning. They confirmed that a credit profile matching Hazel Ross's social security number was used to bolster the refinancing application. They were under the impression she was a silent partner in Cedar Marrow Holdings. I looked at my father. You used my credit score. I said, because yours was tanked. You used my name to get a loan you couldn't pay back. Gordon looked down at his hands. I needed the leverage. He whispered, the store. The store was sinking. Hazel, I thought, if I could just get the renovation done, the traffic would come back. I would have paid off the mortgage. I would have fixed it all. So you risked my future? I asked. You risked me being sued for $1 million? I am your father, he yelled, looking up with wet, desperate eyes. You are supposed to help me. You are supposed to carry the load. Not without my permission, I screamed back. Not by lying to me for 3 years. Madeline wiped her eyes. She looked at me with pure venom. You are so cold. She spat. Look at you. You have it all laid out in folders. You planned this. You wanted to humiliate him. I wanted the truth. I said, you are always calculating. She said, You never just let things be. You could have just let it go. Grandpa has plenty of money. Why did you have to burn the whole family down over a bookkeeping error? Because it wasn't an error, I said. It was a lie. A lie that made Grandpa think I was a failure. A lie that made me think I was crazy. I looked at Franklin. He was sitting very still. His hands were clasped on top of his cane. Grandpa? I asked. He stood up slowly. The chair scraped against the floor. I want an independent trustee, he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the room. Gordon looked up. Dad, no, you don't need that. I can explain. I want a trustee, Franklin repeated. I want a forensic audit of the trust. I want to know exactly how much money has been moved, and to where. He looked at Lorna. And until that is done, there will be no more gifts, no more transfers, no more wedding checks. Lorna stood up, her face blotchy with rage. You cannot do that. The wedding is in 20 days. The vendors need the final payments. Then they will have to wait, Franklin said, or Gordon can pay them from his own pocket, if he has anything left. Gordon put his head in his hands. Dad, you are killing me. You are killing the business. You killed it yourself, son, Franklin said. When you decided that stealing from your family was a business strategy, Lorna turned to me. She looked like she wanted to hit me. I hope you're happy, she hissed. You are the kind of woman who would let her family burn just to be right. You would destroy your sister's happiness just to prove a point. I looked at my mother. I saw the fear in her eyes, the fear of poverty, the fear of losing status, the fear of having to actually pay for the life she felt entitled to. I didn't light the fire. Mom, I said, I just bought a smoke detector. Come on. Gordon, Lorna said, grabbing his shoulder. We are leaving. We will get our own lawyer. They walked out. Madeline followed, shooting one last tearful, hateful glance at me. The door closed with a soft click. The silence in the room was heavy. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. Well, that was clarifying. Franklin sank back into his chair. He looked exhausted. He looked 20 years older than he had when he walked in. Are you okay? I asked, reaching for his hand. He nodded, but he didn't look at me. He reached into his jacket pocket. There is one more thing, he said. He pulled out a thin, battered manila folder. It wasn't one of the ones I had seen before. What is this? I asked. I didn't want to show this to you unless I had to, he said. But after seeing them today, after hearing them call you crazy, he slid it across the table. I opened it. It was a handwritten ledger. Franklin's handwriting. August 4th. Gordon asked for rent help for Hazel. Said she was crying. Hazel didn't mention it on phone. September 1st. Sent check. Gordon said Hazel was too embarrassed to thank me. Seemed odd. October 15th. Gordon asked for increase. Said rent went up. Checked online listings. Cresthaven rents are stable. Why lies? December 20th. Madeline mentioned new caterer. Cost matches rent check exactly. Suspicious. I looked up at him. You knew? I suspected. He said, for a long time, but I didn't want to believe it. I kept writing it down, hoping I was wrong, hoping there was an explanation. He tapped the page. March 12th. Gordon pushed for trust update. Nervous, sweating, decided to sign to see what he would do, gave him rope. You signed the trust update on purpose? I asked, stunned. I knew he was desperate. Franklin said, I knew if I said no, he might do something worse. He might come after you directly. So I signed. But I kept this record. I was waiting for him to slip up. He looked at me, his eyes full of sorrow. I didn't know about the loan in your name. Hazel, if I had known he was hurting you legally, I would have stopped it instantly. I thought he was just skimming from me. I thought I was the only victim. I closed the folder. You were protecting me. I said, in your own way. And you were protecting me, he said. We sat there for a moment. Two survivors of the same shipwreck. Priya gathered her papers. We need to file this ledger with the fraud report, she said softly. It proves premeditation on their part and awareness on yours. It destroys their mental incompetence defense. Franklin nodded. Do it. He stood up again. I'm going to my room, he said. I need to lie down. I will walk you. I said, no. He said, you go. You have work to do. You have a lawsuit to fight. He looked at me, and for the first time that day, he smiled. A real smile. You are a tough cookie. Hazel Ross. You remind me of my mother. She didn't take any guff either. I watched him walk out, his cane tapping rhythmically on the carpet. I looked at the ledger, gave him rope. Franklin hadn't been the victim. He had been the trap, and I had been the trigger. I picked up the folder. I felt a strange sense of calm. The worst had happened. My family was broken. My parents hated me. My sister was destroyed. But the truth was on the table, and it was written in ink. The office was quiet, save for the rhythmic turning of pages. Priya Halden and I sat side by side, reconstructing the architecture of a betrayal using the blueprint my grandfather had secretly drawn. Franklin's private ledger was a terrifying document. It was not just a list of numbers. It was a diary of suspicion. August 12th, 3 years ago. I read aloud. Gordon called late, sounded frantic, said Hazel was crying on the phone about eviction, said she needed $1,500 or she would be on the street by Friday. I looked up at Priya. I never called him. I was not crying. I had just received my first promotion. Priya nodded, making a note on her legal pad. So the predicate for the payments was a fabrication. Gordon created a crisis to solicit the funds. I read the next entry. September 1st. Sent check. Asked Gordon if Hazel was okay. He said she was too ashamed to speak to me. Said I should not bring it up, or it would hurt her pride. He isolated us, I whispered. He told Grandpa I was ashamed, so Grandpa wouldn't ask me. And he told me Grandpa was confused, so I wouldn't ask him. He built a wall of silence and monetized the space between us. Priya tapped the page. Look here. 6 months ago, June 4th, Gordon asked for a bridge loan for the store. I said no. 2 days later, Hazel's rent transfer was rerouted to the new account. Did Gordon do this? Or did Hazel? Waiting to see. He knew, I said, feeling a fresh wave of grief. He knew his son was stealing from him. He just didn't know if I was in on it. He was waiting for the collapse. Priya said he was gathering evidence, and when he spoke up at that dinner, he was not confused. He was pulling the trigger. I closed the ledger. The evidence was complete. We had the motive, the mechanism, and the victims. Now, we just needed the confession, or the confrontation. Priya corrected. The rehearsal dinner was held at Lakeshore Pavilion, a venue that smelled of pine needles and money. The walls were glass. Looking out over the frozen lake, it was beautiful, and every inch of it had been paid for with money that was supposed to keep a roof over my head. I was not invited. I walked in anyway. I was wearing my work clothes, trousers and a blazer, standing in stark contrast to the cocktail attire of the wedding party. I saw Madeline near the bar, laughing with her bridesmaids. She looked radiant. She looked like someone who had never worried about a credit score in her life. I saw Lorna adjusting the centerpieces, fussing over the hydrangeas, and I saw Gordon. He was standing by the fireplace, holding a drink, looking like the lord of the manor. I walked straight to him. Hazel, he said when he saw me. His voice was low, a warning growl. You are not welcome here. I have a legal right to be here. Dad, I said calmly, this venue is listed as a vendor in the financial tracing of the stolen funds. Technically, I am just inspecting the assets of my debtor. Gordon's jaw tightened. Do not make a scene. Not here. Not tonight. Then talk to me. I said, privately. He glared at me, then set his drink down. 5 minutes. In the bridal suite. The bridal suite was a room of cream velvet and mirrors. Gordon closed the door and turned on me. His face twisted with a rage he could finally release. What do you want? He hissed. Money? Is that it? You want a cut? I want you to stop, I said. I reached into my bag and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a draft of a settlement offer Priya had drawn up. I am giving you a choice. Dad, you admit to the family, tonight, that the money was misappropriated. You agree to a repayment plan for Grandpa. You remove my name from the foreclosure proceedings and sign an affidavit stating I had no knowledge of the loan. And if I do? He asked, looking at the paper with disdain. Then I drop the fraud report with the Massbridge Bureau. I said, I call off the investigation. We handle it civilly. You lose the money, but you keep your freedom. Gordon laughed. It was a cold, ugly sound. You think you can blackmail me? It is not blackmail. I said, it is a lifeboat. The ship is already sinking. Dad, I am just offering you a vest. He took the paper and tore it in half. Then he tore it again. I am not admitting anything, he said, throwing the confetti of paper onto the floor, because I did nothing wrong. I saved this family. I did what a man does. I moved capital to where it was needed. You stole. I said, I survived, he shouted. And you? You are just petty. You are jealous because Madeline is getting a wedding and you are getting nothing. I am getting a lawsuit, I said, because of you. He stepped closer to me. He was tall, imposing, using the physical intimidation that had worked when I was a child, but I didn't flinch. I wasn't a child anymore. You know what your problem is. Hazel, he said, his voice dropping to a cruel whisper. You have no grace. You are hard. You are unlovable when you are like this. That is why you are alone. That is why Grandpa had to pay you to live, because nobody would take care of you for free. The words hit me like a physical blow. Unlovable. It echoed every insecurity I had ever had. Every moment I felt like the outsider in my own home. But as the pain washed over me, it took something with it. It took the last shred of guilt I felt for what I was about to do. He was not protecting me. He was not teaching me. He was trying to break me so I wouldn't fight back. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had raised me. And I saw a stranger. I am not unlovable. Dad, I said quietly. I am just insolvent. And unlike you, I know the difference. I turned and walked to the door. You walk out there and you ruin everything, he yelled after me. You ruin Madeline's life. No, I said, opening the door. You did that when you paid for her dreams with a lie. The Unity dinner was the final event before the wedding. It was intimate. Just family and the wedding party. Seated at a long table in the center of the pavilion, the lighting was dim, the candles flickering against the darkening windows. I took a seat at the far end of the table, near the door. Lorna glared at me, but she didn't make a scene. She was too focused on maintaining the image of the perfect family for the guests. The waiters cleared the salad plates. The wine was poured. Franklin tapped his glass with a spoon. The sharp ding, ding, ding cut through the chatter. He stood up. He was wearing his old tuxedo, the one that was slightly too large for him now. He looked around the table, his eyes resting on Madeline, then Lorna, and finally Gordon. I would like to say a few words, Franklin said. Gordon smiled nervously. Dad, maybe we should save the toasts for tomorrow. Sit down. Gordon, Franklin said. His voice was not loud, but it had the weight of iron. Gordon sat. Franklin looked at the guests. He looked at the groom's parents, who were smiling politely. We are here to celebrate a union, Franklin said. A joining of lives, and families are built on trust. They are built on helping each other. He paused. The room was silent. For 3 years. Franklin continued. I have been sending my granddaughter, Hazel, $1,500 a month. A ripple of unease went through the room. I saw Madeline freeze, her glass halfway to her mouth. I sent it because I was told she was struggling. Franklin said, I sent it because I wanted her to be safe. He turned his gaze to Gordon. But at our last dinner, my son told me I was confused. He told me I imagined sending that money. Franklin reached into his pocket and pulled out the bank tracing document I had given him. He unfolded it. I am old, he said, but I can still read. And this paper says that on November 1st, $1,500 left my account. It went to a company called Marrowgate, and then it went to an account for Ross Outdoor Supply. The silence was absolute. It spread like a stain across the white tablecloths. And then, Franklin said, looking at the groom's parents, it came here, to Lakeshore Pavilion. Gordon stood up, his chair scraping violently against the floor. Dad, stop this. You are having an episode. Explain it. Gordon, Franklin said, explain to these people why my rent checks for Hazel are paying for the wine they are drinking. Gordon looked around the room. He looked at the shocked faces of the guests. He looked at Lorna, who was staring at her plate. I was managing the trust, Gordon stammered. It was an investment. Investment? Franklin asked. Since when is a wedding centerpiece an investment? I stood up then. It wasn't just the wedding. I said, my voice was steady. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just let the math do the shouting. I paid my rent. I said to the room, every month, $1,500. My grandfather paid my rent. Every month, $1,500. I looked at Gordon. That is $3,000 a month for a one-bedroom apartment in a foreclosure building. The only way both payments exist is if someone stole one of them. I looked at the groom's mother. If you check the deposit dates for this venue, I said, you will find they match the dates my grandfather's money was transferred to Ross Outdoor Supply. Gordon's face turned a mottled purple. You are lying. You are a liar. Show them the ledger. Dad, I said, show them the Ross Outdoor Supply books. Or should I show them the foreclosure notice where you used my name to secure a loan you defaulted on? Madeline made a sound like a wounded animal. She stood up, knocking her chair over. Is it true? She screamed at Gordon. Is it true? Gordon looked at her. Maddie, honey, it is complicated. Did you steal it? She shrieked. Did you pay for my wedding with stolen money? I did it for you, Gordon yelled back, cracking at last. I did it so you wouldn't have to be ashamed, so you could have the life your mother wanted for you. Lorna stood up. Do not bring me into this. I told you to fix it. I told you to put the money back. You told him to bribe me. I said to Lorna, you offered me $5,000 in the parking lot to keep quiet. The guests were pulling out their phones. Some were recording. The perfect image of the Ross family was fracturing in real time, the shards flying everywhere. Madeline looked at me. Her face was ruined with mascara and tears. You knew, she whispered. You knew and you let me walk into this. I tried to tell you. I said, you told me I was jealous. You told me I was cold. I am cold. Madeline, I am freezing because I have been paying for your heat. Madeline burst into tears and ran from the room. The groom followed her, casting a horrified look at Gordon. Gordon slumped into his chair. He looked small. He looked defeated. Franklin remained standing. He looked at his son with a profound sadness. I have spoken to my attorneys. Franklin said, the trust is frozen. There will be an audit. He looked at Lorna, and there will be no more checks. Not for the store, not for the house, not for the lawyers you are going to need. Lorna looked at Franklin with pure hatred. You old bastard, she hissed. You set us up. You played games with us. I told the truth. Franklin said, that is not a game. He turned to me. Hazel, come here. I walked to the head of the table. Franklin took my hand. He reached into his jacket again. He pulled out a checkbook. I told you I was confused, he said to the room, his voice clear. But I was lucid enough to make one change 3 months ago. He handed me a slip of paper. It was a receipt for an escrow account. When I started suspecting Gordon was diverting the funds, Franklin said, I couldn't stop the transfers immediately without tipping him off, so I redirected the destination of the last 3 payments. I bypassed the Marrowgate account. He looked at Gordon. For the last 90 days, the money hasn't been going to the store. It has been going here. He squeezed my hand. $4,500. Franklin said, it is in an escrow account. In your name. Only your name. He looked at me. It is not a lot. Hazel, but it is enough to hire a defense attorney for the lawsuit. It is enough to start fighting back. I looked at the receipt. I looked at my grandfather. He hadn't just watched. He had armed me. Thank you, I whispered. The room was in chaos. The venue manager was approaching Gordon with a frantic expression. Lorna was screaming at a waiter to stop recording, but Franklin and I were in the eye of the storm. We are done here, Franklin said. He took his cane. I took his arm. We walked out of the pavilion, past the stunned guests, past the wreckage of my family's reputation, and into the cold, clean night air. We stood in the parking lot. The wind was biting, but it felt good. It felt real. "What happens now?" I asked. Franklin buttoned his coat. "Now, Gordon faces the consequences. The bank will take the building. The state will investigate the fraud. He will likely lose the store." "And the family?" I asked. He looked at the lit windows of the pavilion. "The family was gone a long time ago." "Hazel, we just finally turned off the lights." My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a voicemail. I put it on speaker. "Ms. Ross, this is Investigator Davis from the Mass Bridge Financial Protection Bureau. I am calling regarding case number 44921. We have reviewed your affidavit and the supporting documents. We are opening a formal inquiry into Cedar Marrow Holdings and Ross Outdoor Supply. We will need you to come in for a sworn statement on Monday. Please bring the original lease." The message ended. I looked at Franklin. He nodded once, a slow, solemn nod. "Do it," he said. "Tell them everything." I looked back at the pavilion. I could see Gordon through the glass, arguing with the manager, his hands waving wildly. He was still trying to spin the story. He was still trying to sell the lie. But nobody was buying it anymore. I put my phone away. "I am ready," I said. Franklin opened his car door. "Then let's go home," he said. "The real one." I got into my car. I watched my grandfather drive away, his taillights fading into the dark. I started my engine. The heater kicked on, warm and steady. I was broke. I was being sued. I was an orphan in every way that mattered. But as I pulled out onto the highway, watching the road stretch out before me, I realized something. For the first time in 3 years, the road ahead belonged to me. The debt was not mine. The shame was not mine. I drove into the darkness, and I didn't look back. Thank you so much for listening to this story of betrayal, vindication, and the high price of truth. It's a heavy journey when the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones you need protection from. But Hazel's courage to stand up and reclaim her reality is something we can all admire. I'd love to hear from you. Where are you listening from today? Have you ever had to make a tough choice between keeping the peace and telling the truth? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. I read as many as I can. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories and hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. We have many more stories of justice coming your way. Thank you for your support, and I'll see you in the next one.